In the pristine halls of Valenhall Palace, where tradition governs every breath and protocol dictates every step, Royal Guard Captain Marcus Thorne had witnessed countless ceremonies, state dinners, and diplomatic meetings. For 12 years, he had served the crown with unwavering loyalty, his rifle always ready, his vigilance never faltering. But nothing in his extensive training had prepared him for the moment when he would watch Princess Ilera, third in line to the throne, slip away into the shadows with someone who could change the very foundation of the kingdom forever. What began as a routine security detail would soon become a test of loyalty, duty, and the price of protecting those we serve, even from themselves. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Valenhall Palace as Captain Marcus Thorne adjusted his ceremonial uniform for the third time. The golden braiding caught the early light, but Marcus barely noticed. His attention was focused entirely on the detailed security briefing clutched in his weathered hands. Today was different. Today, Princess Ilera would be attending the annual Harvest Festival in the capital city. Her first public appearance since the controversial photos had surfaced 3 weeks ago. Marcus had been Princess Ilera's personal protection officer for 2 years now, ever since the previous captain had retired after a minor security breach. In that time, he had grown to understand the 24-year-old princess better than most. She was intelligent, compassionate, and fiercely independent, qualities that made her beloved by the people, but challenging to protect. Unlike her older siblings, who followed protocol with military precision, Ilera had a habit of deviating from planned routes, stopping to speak with citizens, and generally making Marcus's job significantly more difficult. Captain Thorne, the voice belonged to Lieutenant Sarah Chun, his second-in-command, and one of the few people he trusted completely with the princess's safety. She approached with her usual brisk efficiency, tablet in hand. The advance team has completed their sweep of the festival grounds. We've identified 3 potential choke points and have additional officers stationed at each location. The princess's route has been cleared and secured. Marcus nodded, reviewing the digital map on Chen's tablet. The route was straightforward. Arrive at the main entrance, proceed down Festival Lane, stop at the ceremonial stage for the princess's speech, then continue to the children's pavilion where she would present awards to young artists. Simple enough, but Marcus had learned that simplicity often masked complexity when it came to royal duties. What about the media presence? Marcus asked, knowing that the press would be out in force after the recent speculation about Ilera's personal life. Controlled zones only. 23 accredited photographers and journalists. We've run background checks on all of them. Chen paused, her expression growing more serious. Sir, there's something else. Intelligence has picked up increased chatter on social media about the princess. Nothing specific, but the volume has tripled since last week. Marcus frowned. Social media had become both a blessing and a curse for royal security. It allowed them to monitor public sentiment and potential threats, but it also gave every person with a smartphone the ability to track and comment on the royal family's movements in real time. The recent photos of Princess Ilera at a private charity event, laughing with an unidentified young man, had generated thousands of comments ranging from supportive to sharply critical. Double the perimeter detail, Marcus instructed, and I want our tech team monitoring all major platforms during the event. If anything unusual comes up, I want to know immediately. As Chen departed to implement the additional security measures, Marcus made his way through the palace's familiar corridors toward the princess's private wing. The walls were lined with portraits of monarchs past, their painted eyes seeming to watch his every step. He had walked these halls thousands of times, but today they felt different somehow, charged with an anticipation he couldn't quite define. Princess Ilera's suite occupied the East Wing's 3rd floor, with windows that overlooked the palace gardens where she often took her morning walks. Marcus knocked on the ornate wooden door and waited for permission to enter. The voice that responded was distinctly American, belonging to Rebecca Martinez, the princess's personal assistant and one of her closest confidants. She's in the sitting room, Captain, Rebecca said as she opened the door. Fair warning, she's not entirely happy about today's restrictions. Marcus stepped into the elegantly appointed room where Princess Alara sat at her writing desk, dressed in a deep blue ensemble that complemented her auburn hair. She looked up as he entered, and Marcus was struck, as always, by the intelligence in her green eyes. There was something else there today, though, a restlessness that made him instinctively more alert. "Good morning, Your Highness," Marcus said with a formal bow. "I wanted to review today's security arrangements with you personally." Alara set down her pen and turned to face him fully. "Marcus, we've been through this. I understand the need for security, but I refuse to be shuttled through the festival like a museum piece. These are my people. They deserve to see their princess as more than just a figure waving from behind a wall of bodyguards." This was familiar territory for both of them. Marcus had learned to navigate Alara's strong will with a combination of professional firmness and genuine respect. "Your Highness, given the recent media attention, we believe it's prudent to maintain slightly elevated security protocols. The route remains the same, but we'll have a larger presence." "The recent media attention," Alara repeated, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "You mean the fact that I was photographed speaking with someone at a charity event? Since when did conversation become a security risk?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "It's not the conversation itself, Your Highness. It's the speculation it has generated and the increased public interest that concerns us. Our job is to anticipate and prepare for any possibility." Alara stood and walked to the window, her hands clasped behind her back in a gesture Marcus recognized as her thinking pose. The princess was known for her quick mind and her ability to see situations from multiple angles, qualities that would serve her well as a future monarch, but that sometimes put her at odds with security protocols. "Tell me something, Marcus," she said without turning around. "Do you ever wonder what would be like to walk through a festival without 20 people watching your every move? To stop and buy a piece of art simply because you like it, not because it makes for good publicity photos?" The question caught Marcus off guard. In all his years of royal protection, he had rarely been asked to consider the personal cost of security measures. His job was to keep the royal family safe, not to contemplate their emotional well-being. Yet something in Alara's voice suggested this wasn't merely a rhetorical question. "I imagine it would be quite liberating, Your Highness," he answered honestly. "But my primary concern must always be your safety and the stability of the crown." Alara turned back to face him, and Marcus saw a flicker of something in her expression, appreciation, perhaps, for his honest response. "I know you do your job well, Marcus. I've never questioned that. But sometimes I wonder if we've become so focused on protecting the institution that we've forgotten to protect the person." Before Marcus could respond, Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Your Highness, the cars are ready. We should leave soon to stay on schedule." As they prepared to depart, Marcus noticed Princess Alara checking her phone more frequently than usual. She seemed distracted, almost anxious, in a way that was unlike her typical pre-event demeanor. He made a mental note to stay particularly alert during the day's activities. The drive to the festival grounds took 25 minutes through the winding streets of the capital. Marcus rode in the lead vehicle, maintaining constant radio contact with the other units in the convoy. Princess Alara traveled in the armored limousine directly behind him, accompanied by Rebecca and Lady Catherine Worthington, her lady-in-waiting and protocol advisor. As they approached the festival grounds, Marcus could see the crowds already gathering despite the early hour. Colorful banners hung from every available surface, and the air filled with the sounds of musicians warming up and vendors setting up their stalls. The Harvest Festival was one of the kingdom's most beloved traditions, celebrating the end of the growing season and the abundance of the land. For many citizens, it would be their only opportunity to see a member of the royal family in person. The convoy pulled up to the designated arrival point, where a red carpet had been laid out and ceremonial guards stood at attention. Marcus stepped out first, his eyes immediately scanning the crowd for anything unusual. The security perimeter was holding, and his advance team signaled that all was clear. Yet something felt off, a tension in the air that he couldn't quite identify. Princess Alara emerged from her vehicle with practiced grace, smiling and waving to the cheering crowd. She looked every inch the royal princess in her carefully chosen outfit, her demeanor warm but appropriately regal. Marcus positioned himself at her left shoulder, his hand resting casually but purposefully near his concealed weapon. The first part of the visit proceeded flawlessly. Princess Alara moved through the crowd with natural ease, stopping to speak with children, admiring the work of local artisans, and posing for the controlled media photos. Marcus found himself relaxing slightly as they fell into the familiar rhythm of a royal walkabout. It was at the children's pavilion that everything changed. Princess Alara was presenting awards to young artists when Marcus noticed a commotion near the rear entrance of the pavilion. A dark van had pulled up, not part of the official convoy and not on any security list he had seen. Marcus immediately spoke into his radio microphone, alerting his team to the unauthorized vehicle. But before he could take any action, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Princess Alara had noticed the van too, and instead of showing concern or confusion, her face lit up with what could only be described as joy. She began moving toward the rear of the pavilion, away from the planned route, and directly toward the mysterious vehicle. "Your Highness," Marcus called out, moving quickly to intercept her. But Alara was already stepping away from the crowd, her pace quickening with each step. The van's door slid open, and a young man stepped out, tall, dark-haired, and dressed in casual clothes that marked him as decidedly non-royal. Marcus recognized him immediately from the intelligence photos that had been circulating since the charity event pictures were published. This was Alexander Cross, the 26-year-old son of Margaret Cross, the Queen's former private secretary who had left royal service under mysterious circumstances 5 years ago. Marcus's training kicked in automatically. Unauthorized person approaching the principal. Potential threat to security. His hand moved toward his weapon as he stepped between Princess Alara and the young man. "Your Highness, please return to the designated area," Marcus said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of 12 years of royal protection experience. But Princess Alara barely seemed to hear him. Her attention was entirely focused on Alexander Cross, who was now walking toward them with a smile that suggested this meeting was far from accidental. "Alex," Alara said, her voice soft but clearly audible to Marcus's trained ear. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Marcus felt the pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in his mind. The princess's distracted behavior all morning, her frequent phone checking, her restlessness during the security briefing. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a planned meeting. And if it was planned, then Princess Alara had deliberately concealed it from her security detail. "Your Highness," Marcus said again, more urgently this time, "we need to return to the main group immediately." Alexander Cross had reached them now, and Marcus could see the easy familiarity between him and the princess. This was clearly not their first meeting, despite what the official record suggested. Marcus's mind raced through the implications. If Princess Alara was conducting a secret relationship with the son of a former royal employee, someone who had left service under questionable circumstances, the security implications were staggering. "Marcus," Princess Alara said, turning to face him directly, "I need you to trust me, just for a few minutes." The request was impossible. Trust, in Marcus's profession, was earned through transparency and adherence to protocol. Secret meetings with unauthorized individuals were the antithesis of everything he had been trained to prevent. Yet the sincerity in Princess Alara's voice gave him pause. "Your Highness, I cannot allow you to meet with an individual who hasn't been cleared by security. The protocols exist for your protection and for the security of the crown." "The crown," Alara repeated, her voice taking on a bitter edge. "Always the crown. What about what I need? What about what's right?" Alexander Cross stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Captain Thorne, I understand your concerns. I have no intention of putting Princess Alara in danger. I just need to speak with her." Marcus studied the young man carefully. Alexander appeared sincere, but appearances could be deceiving. His mother's departure from royal service had never been fully explained, and Marcus knew that family loyalties could run deep, in both positive and negative directions. "I'm sorry, sir, but I cannot permit this meeting without proper security clearance," Marcus stated firmly. Princess Alera's expression hardened. "Then, I'm ordering you to step aside, Captain." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. In all his years of service, Marcus had never had a member of the royal family directly countermand his security decisions. The princess had the authority to give such an order, but following it would violate every protocol he had sworn to uphold. Around them, the festival continued, the sounds of music and laughter creating a surreal backdrop to the tense confrontation. Marcus was acutely aware that they were still in public view, though the rear of the pavilion was partially shielded from the main crowd. His team was watching, waiting for his signal, ready to intervene if necessary. Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Captain, we have eyes on the situation. Advise on action." Marcus looked at Princess Alera, seeing not just the royal he was sworn to protect, but a young woman clearly struggling with the constraints of her position. He looked at Alexander Cross, trying to read the intentions behind the young man's earnest expression. And he thought about his duty, not just to the crown, but to the person who wore it. "Your Highness," he said finally, his voice low enough that only she and Alexander could hear. "If you insist on this meeting, I cannot physically stop you, but I cannot guarantee your safety, and I cannot be responsible for the consequences." Princess Alera's expression softened slightly. "I understand, Marcus, but some things are more important than safety." She began walking toward the van, Alexander beside her. Marcus followed, every instinct screaming at him to intervene more forcefully. But something held him back. Perhaps it was the genuine emotion he had heard in the princess's voice, or perhaps it was his growing understanding that sometimes protecting someone meant allowing them to make their own choices, even dangerous ones. As they reached the van, Marcus positioned himself where he could observe both the princess and maintain visual contact with his backup team. His hand remained near his weapon, and his radio stayed open. If this was a trap, if Alexander Cross represented some kind of threat, Marcus would be ready. The van door slid open wider, revealing a simply appointed interior with 2 bench seats. Alexander gestured for Princess Alera to enter, and she did so without hesitation. Marcus's tension ratcheted up another notch as she disappeared from his direct line of sight. "Your Highness," he called out, taking a step closer to the van. "I need to maintain visual contact." Princess Alera's head appeared in the doorway. "Marcus, I need privacy for this conversation. Please give us 10 minutes. You can watch the van. I'm not going anywhere." It was a compromise of sorts, though not one that Marcus found acceptable. But with Princess Alera already inside the vehicle and showing no signs of distress, his options were limited. He could order his team to surround the van, creating a scene that would undoubtedly attract media attention and public scrutiny. Or he could maintain his position and hope that his assessment of the situation was correct. Marcus chose a middle path. He moved closer to the van, positioning himself where he could hear voices if they were raised and where he could reach the door in seconds if needed. He also signaled to Lieutenant Chen to move the backup team closer while maintaining the pretense of normal security operations. From inside the van came the sound of low, earnest conversation. Marcus couldn't make out specific words, but he could hear the emotional undertones, urgency from Alexander, determination from Princess Alera. Whatever they were discussing, it was clearly of significant importance to both of them. The 10 minutes Princess Alera had requested stretched into 15, then 20. Marcus found himself torn between his duty to respect her wishes and his growing concern about the length of the meeting. Every moment that passed increased the likelihood that their absence from the main festival activities would be noticed by media or security personnel who weren't part of Marcus's immediate team. Finally, after 25 minutes that felt like hours, the van door slid open. Princess Alera emerged first, and Marcus immediately noted the change in her demeanor. The restless energy from earlier had been replaced by something else. Determination mixed with what looked like resignation. Alexander Cross followed her out of the van, and Marcus saw him hand Princess Alara a small envelope before stepping back toward the vehicle. The exchange was brief, almost businesslike, but Marcus caught the look that passed between them, a look that spoke of deeper connection and shared understanding. "Thank you," Princess Alara said to Alexander, her voice formal but warm. "For everything." Alexander nodded, his expression serious. "Be careful, Alara. And remember what we discussed." As Alexander climbed back into the van and it pulled away, Princess Alara stood, watching until it disappeared from sight. Then she turned to Marcus, and he saw in her eyes a resolve that hadn't been there before. "We should return to the festival," she said simply. Marcus nodded, though he had 1,000 questions he couldn't ask. "Of course, Your Highness. The Children's Awards ceremony should be resuming shortly." As they walked back toward the main pavilion, Marcus found himself analyzing everything he had witnessed. The secret meeting, the obvious familiarity between Princess Alara and Alexander Cross, the envelope that now rested in the princess's purse, and, most troubling of all, the change in Princess Alara's demeanor that suggested whatever had been discussed in that van had significant implications for her future. The remainder of the festival visit proceeded without incident. Princess Alara resumed her royal duties with apparent normalcy, presenting awards to the young artists and delivering her scheduled speech about the importance of creativity and community. To the casual observer, nothing had changed. But Marcus, trained to notice subtle variations in behavior and body language, could see the difference. The princess was operating on 2 levels now, performing her public role while processing whatever private revelation had occurred during her meeting with Alexander Cross. As they prepared to leave the festival grounds, Marcus made a decision that went against every protocol in his training manual. Instead of immediately filing a report about the unauthorized meeting, he chose to wait. Not permanently. He couldn't ignore such a significant security breach indefinitely, but long enough to understand what he had witnessed and what it might mean for Princess Alara's future. The drive back to the palace was conducted in relative silence. Princess Alara gazed out the window at the passing countryside, her fingers occasionally touching the purse that contained the envelope from Alexander Cross. Marcus used the time to review every detail of the day's events, trying to piece together a picture of what was happening beneath the surface of royal protocol and public appearances. Back at Valenhall Palace, as Princess Alara retired to her private quarters and the various members of her staff dispersed to their respective duties, Marcus found himself alone in his office with a decision to make. On his desk lay the incident report form that protocol demanded he complete. Every detail of the unauthorized meeting should be documented, analyzed, and forwarded up the chain of command for appropriate action. But as Marcus stared at the blank form, he thought about Princess Alara's words. Some things are more important than safety. He thought about the genuine emotion he had witnessed, the careful planning that had gone into the meeting, and the profound change in the princess's demeanor afterward. Marcus had spent his entire career following orders and protocols. He had never questioned the wisdom of the rules that governed royal security, never doubted that the system he served was designed to protect not just individuals, but the institution of the monarchy itself. But today, for the first time, he found himself wondering whether blind adherence to protocol might sometimes cause more harm than good. As the sun set over Valenhall Palace, casting long shadows across Marcus's office, he made a choice that would change everything. He placed the blank incident report in his desk drawer and locked it away. Whatever Princess Alara was involved in, whatever Alexander Cross represented, Marcus decided he needed to understand the full picture before potentially destroying lives and relationships with a single report. It was a decision that went against every instinct of his training, every rule of his profession. But it was also a decision that recognized Princess Alara not just as a member of the royal family to be protected, but as a person deserving of privacy, understanding, and perhaps most importantly, the right to make her own choices about her life and future. The morning after the Harvest Festival, Marcus arrived at Valenhall Palace 2 hours earlier than usual. The previous night had been sleepless, filled with questions and second-guessing about his decision to withhold the incident report. Now, in the gray light of dawn, he needed answers before his conscience or his duty compelled him to act. The palace was quieter at this hour, with only essential staff moving through the corridors. Marcus made his way to the security archives, a climate-controlled vault 3 levels below the main palace that housed decades of intelligence files, background checks, and incident reports. If he was going to understand Alexander Cross and his connection to Princess Alara, this was where he would find the foundation of that knowledge. Marcus's security clearance gave him access to most files, but the ones he needed required special authorization. Fortunately, as captain of Princess Alara's protection detail, he had broad investigative powers when matters potentially affected her security. The question was whether his current investigation fell within those parameters or represented a dangerous overreach of his authority. The file on Margaret Cross, Alexander's mother, was surprisingly thick for someone who had served as a private secretary. Marcus spread the contents across a secure reading table and began to piece together a story that had been carefully obscured by official discretion and royal protocol. Margaret Cross had joined the royal household 15 years ago as an assistant to the Queen's private secretary. She was efficient, discreet, and apparently well-liked by both staff and family members. Her personnel file showed steady promotions and glowing performance reviews. She had been granted security clearance for sensitive documents and had accompanied the royal family on numerous official trips. But 5 years ago, everything changed. The first indication of trouble came in a memo from the palace's head of personnel, noting that Mrs. Cross had requested an extended leave of absence for personal family matters. The leave was approved without question, a courtesy typically extended to long-serving and trusted staff members. However, the leave stretched from weeks into months, and eventually, Margaret Cross submitted her resignation. What intrigued Marcus most was what wasn't in the file. There was no exit interview, no explanation of the personal matters that had necessitated her departure, and no forwarding address beyond a post office box in London. For someone who had been deeply embedded in the royal household for over a decade, Margaret Cross had simply vanished from official records. Marcus dug deeper, pulling files on other staff members who had worked closely with Margaret Cross. He found what he was looking for in the personnel file of Thomas Hartwell, a former security officer who had left service around the same time. Hartwell's exit interview contained a single cryptic line: disagreement with management regarding appropriate boundaries in staff relationships with family members. The picture that began to emerge suggested that Margaret Cross hadn't simply left for personal reasons. She had been pushed out, likely due to some perceived violation of the careful boundaries that separated royal family members from their staff. The question was whether this violation had been professional, personal, or something more complex. Marcus closed the files and sat back in his chair, processing what he had learned. If Margaret Cross had been forced to leave her position due to inappropriate closeness with a member of the royal family, then her son Alexander's relationship with Princess Alara took on potentially darker implications. Was this a case of history repeating itself? Or was Alexander Cross deliberately cultivating a relationship with the princess for reasons that had nothing to do with genuine affection? A soft knock on the archive door interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Shun entered, looking slightly puzzled by finding her superior in the basement archives at such an early hour. "Good morning, Captain," she said. "I've been looking for you. We've received a request from the Queen's office for a full security briefing on yesterday's festival visit. They want the report by noon today." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. A request for a security briefing from the Queen's office was routine after major public events, but the timing suggested that someone had noticed something unusual about yesterday's activities. If Princess Alara's meeting with Alexander Cross had been observed by other security personnel, or worse, by media outlets, then Marcus's decision to delay reporting could be seen as a cover-up rather than prudent investigation. Did they specify what aspects of the visit they want covered. Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Standard protocol review, crowd management assessment, and any unusual incidents or deviations from planned procedures, Chen replied. Nothing out of the ordinary, but they did emphasize that they want a comprehensive report. Marcus nodded, his mind racing through his options. He could complete the report without mentioning the Alexander Cross meeting, but that would be a deliberate omission that could be discovered later. He could include the meeting, but frame it as a minor security concern that had been appropriately managed. Or he could request a private audience with the Queen's private secretary to discuss sensitive matters that might not be appropriate for a written report. Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll have the report ready by the deadline. In the meantime, I want you to conduct a discreet review of our festival security procedures. Look for any gaps or areas where our protocols might need adjustment. Chen nodded and left Marcus alone with his dilemma. As he made his way back to his office, Marcus realized that his investigation into Margaret Cross had raised more questions than answers. He needed more information, and there was only one source that could provide it: Alexander Cross himself. The idea of initiating contact with someone who represented a potential security threat went against every protocol Marcus had been trained to follow. But, given the circumstances, conventional approaches seemed inadequate. If Alexander Cross was pursuing a relationship with Princess Alara for legitimate reasons, then understanding his intentions was crucial for her protection. If his motives were more sinister, then Marcus needed to know that as well. Marcus spent the morning crafting his security report for the Queen's office, carefully balancing accuracy with discretion. He described Princess Alara's interactions with festival attendees as warm and appropriate, noted that crowd control had been effective, and reported no significant security incidents. It wasn't technically a lie. Marcus had successfully maintained the princess's safety throughout the event, but it was certainly an incomplete accounting of the day's activities. After submitting the report, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. He was going to find Alexander Cross and have a conversation that would either put his concerns to rest or confirm his worst fears about the young man's intentions regarding Princess Alara. The address Marcus found for Alexander Cross led him to a modest apartment building in London's Bloomsbury district. It was the kind of neighborhood that attracted graduate students, young professionals, and people who valued character over luxury. Marcus parked his personal car several blocks away and walked to the building, dressed in civilian clothes that he hoped would make him less conspicuous. Alexander Cross lived on the third floor of a converted Victorian townhouse. Marcus climbed the narrow stairs, noting the building's solid construction and well-maintained interior. Whatever Alexander's motivations regarding Princess Alara, he didn't appear to be motivated by a desire for luxury or status symbols. Marcus knocked on the door marked 3B and waited. When it opened, Alexander Cross appeared genuinely surprised to see him, but not alarmed, a reaction that Marcus filed away as potentially significant. "Captain Thorne," Alexander said, stepping back from the doorway. "I wasn't expecting you, but please come in." The apartment was small, but comfortable, furnished with an eclectic mix of pieces that suggested both modest means and personal taste. Books lined makeshift shelves, and a laptop computer set open on a desk near the window. Marcus noted several photographs on a side table, including one that showed Alexander with an older woman who resembled him strongly, presumably his mother. "I apologize for the intrusion," Marcus began, "but I think we need to have a conversation about Princess Alara." Alexander gestured for Marcus to sit in one of two chairs that comprised the apartment's living area. "I was wondering when this conversation would happen. Can I offer you tea or coffee?" Marcus declined a refreshment, but accepted the seat, studying Alexander's demeanor carefully. The young man seemed calm, even relieved, as if he had been expecting this confrontation and was prepared for it. "I need to understand your relationship with Princess Alara," Marcus said directly. "Yesterday's meeting was clearly not your first contact with her, and given your mother's history with the royal household, I have concerns about your intentions." Alexander was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. My relationship with Princess Alara, is complicated. But I can assure you that I have no intention of harming her, exploiting her, or using her for personal gain. That's exactly what someone with harmful intentions would say, Marcus observed. I need more than assurances. Alexander stood and walked to his desk, returning with a manila folder that he handed to Marcus. These are letters, he said. Letters that my mother received from members of the royal family over the years she worked for them. I think they'll help explain why I'm involved in Princess Alara's life and why my mother had to leave her position. Marcus opened the folder and found himself looking at handwritten correspondence on royal letterhead. The first letter was dated 8 years ago and was signed by Princess Alara herself, though she would have been only 16 at the time. The handwriting was younger, less polished than he had seen in her recent correspondence, but the content was mature and thoughtful. Dear Mrs. Cross, the letter read, I wanted to thank you for listening to me yesterday when I was so upset about the press coverage of my charity work. It means more than you know to have someone who understands that sometimes being royal feels more like being trapped. Your advice about finding ways to help people that don't depend on titles or publicity was exactly what I needed to hear. Marcus continued reading through the correspondence, finding letters from Princess Alara spanning several years. The letters revealed a young woman struggling with the constraints of royal life, seeking guidance and understanding from someone who saw her as a person rather than an institution. Margaret Cross had clearly served as something of a mentor and confidant to the princess during her teenage years. But it was the final letter in the collection that explained everything. Dated 5 years ago, just before Margaret Cross's departure from royal service, it was written in Princess Alara's adult handwriting and marked personal and confidential. Dear Margaret, it read, I am so sorry that my seeking your counsel has put you in an impossible position. I never intended for our conversations to be seen as inappropriate or to threaten your career. The Queen's private secretary has made it clear that staff members are not meant to serve as personal advisors to family members beyond their official duties. I understand why you feel you must resign, but please know that losing your friendship and guidance feels like losing a part of myself. If there is ever anything I can do to help you or Alexander, you only need to ask. Marcus looked up from a letter to find Alexander watching him intently. Your mother was forced to leave because she had become too close to Princess Alara? Not too close, Alexander corrected. Too honest. My mother made the mistake of treating Princess Alara like a human being who needed guidance and support, rather than like a royal who only needed protocol and protection. When Alara began asking her advice about personal matters, about the pressure she felt, the loneliness of her position, her concerns about her future, some people in the palace decided that my mother was overstepping her bounds. Marcus absorbed this information, seeing the events of the previous day in a new light. And your relationship with Princess Alara began how? She reached out to me about 2 years ago, after my mother died, Alexander said quietly. Alara had tried to maintain contact with my mother after she left the palace, but the palace staff made it difficult. When my mother became ill, Alara somehow learned about it and tried to help, but by then it was too late. After the funeral, Alara contacted me to apologize for not being able to do more and to ask if there was anything she could do for me. And that led to a romantic relationship? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer was more complex than simple romance. Alexander shook his head. It's not romantic, Captain. At least, not in the way you might think. Alara and I became friends because we both understood what it was like to lose my mother. She lost a mentor and confidant, and I lost my parent. We began meeting occasionally, always carefully and quietly because she needed someone who understood her situation but wasn't part of the royal system. Marcus studied Alexander's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What he saw instead was genuine emotion and what appeared to be honest concern for Princess Alara's well-being. But yesterday's meeting was different, Marcus observed. There was an urgency to it, a sense of crisis. Alexander's expression grew more serious. Yes, it was different. Alara is facing a decision about her future, and she needed advice from someone who isn't bound by palace politics or royal protocol. She needed someone who could help her think through her options as a person, not as a princess. What kind of decision? Marcus asked, though he had a growing suspicion about the answer. I think that's something you should discuss with Princess Alara directly, Alexander said. I've told you what I can about our relationship and my intentions. The rest is her story to tell, not mine. Marcus spent another hour talking with Alexander Cross, asking detailed questions about their meetings, their conversations, and Alexander's understanding of Princess Alara's current situation. By the end of their conversation, Marcus was convinced that Alexander represented no direct threat to the princess's safety. But he was also convinced that Princess Alara was involved in something that went far beyond secret meetings with family friends. As he prepared to leave Alexander's apartment, Marcus made a decision that surprised both of them. I'm going to give you my direct phone number, he said, handing Alexander a card. If Princess Alara is truly facing a difficult decision about her future, then, as her protection officer, I need to understand what that decision involves. If she trusts you enough to seek your counsel, then perhaps you can help me understand how to best protect her during whatever is coming. Alexander accepted the card with a nod. I'll speak with her, Captain, but I think you should know that Alara has a great deal of respect for you. She's mentioned more than once that you're one of the few people in her life who seems to genuinely care about her well-being rather than just her public image. On the drive back to Valenhall Palace, Marcus reflected on everything he had learned. Alexander Cross appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a friend and advisor to Princess Alara who had no ulterior motives beyond wanting to help her navigate the complexities of royal life. But the revelation that Princess Alara was facing some kind of major decision about her future raised new concerns about his ability to protect her. Marcus had dedicated his career to physical protection, preventing threats, managing crowds, ensuring safe passage from one location to another. But the threat that Princess Alara now faced seemed to be internal rather than external, a conflict between her personal desires and her royal duties. It was the kind of threat that couldn't be stopped with security protocols or protective barriers. As he approached the palace gates, Marcus realized that his conversation with Alexander Cross had only been the beginning. If he truly wanted to protect Princess Alara, he needed to understand the decision she was facing and the forces that were pushing her toward what might be a life-altering choice. And that meant having a conversation with the princess herself, a conversation that would require him to step outside his traditional role as silent protector and become something more complex. A trusted advisor who understood that sometimes protecting someone meant helping them protect themselves. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Marcus parked his car and prepared to re-enter the world of royal protocol and careful discretion. But he carried with him now a deeper understanding of Princess Alara's situation and a growing conviction that the most important part of his job might not involve his weapon or his security training at all. It might involve his ability to listen, understand, and provide the kind of support that had nothing to do with physical protection and everything to do with human compassion. Part 3 the next morning brought an unexpected summons that made Marcus's pulse quicken. Lady Catherine Worthington, Princess Alara's protocol advisor, delivered the message personally, a departure from normal procedure that immediately signaled its importance. Captain Thorne, Lady Catherine said, her usually composed demeanor showing traces of strain, Her Royal Highness requests a private meeting with you in her study at 10 o'clock. She specifically asked that you come alone and that the meeting not be logged in your official schedule. Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. In his 15 years of royal protection, he had never been asked to meet privately with a member of the royal family outside of security briefings or operational discussions. The request suggested that Princess Alara intended to discuss matters that went far beyond his traditional role as her protection officer. Did Her Royal Highness indicate the nature of the discussion? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. Lady Catherine shook her head, but Marcus caught a flicker of concern in her expression. She only said that it involved matters of personal security that required discretion. Captain, if I may speak frankly, Princess Alara has been different since the festival yesterday. More reserved, but also more determined. I'm concerned that she's contemplating something significant. Marcus thanked Lady Catherine and spent the remaining hour before the meeting reviewing everything he knew about Princess Alara's current situation. His conversation with Alexander Cross had provided important context, but it had also made clear that the princess was facing some kind of major decision about her future. As a protection officer, Marcus needed to understand what that decision involved and how it might affect his ability to ensure her safety. Princess Alara's private study was located in the quieter west wing of the palace, away from the formal reception rooms and official offices that dominated the palace's public spaces. Marcus had been there only a few times before, always for brief security consultations, but he had noted its personal character, filled with books, family photographs, and mementos from the princess's various charitable endeavors. When he knocked on the study door at precisely 10 o'clock, Princess Alara's voice called for him to enter. Marcus found her seated at her desk, but she immediately rose and gestured toward two comfortable chairs arranged near the fireplace, a more intimate setting than the formal desk arrangement typically used for official meetings. "Thank you for coming, Marcus," Princess Alara said as they settled into the chairs. "I know this request was unusual, but I need to discuss something with you that can't wait for a formal security briefing." Marcus studied the princess's expression, noting the same determined resolve he had observed after her meeting with Alexander Cross. "Of course, Your Royal Highness. How can I be of service?" Princess Alara was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather her thoughts. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of careful consideration and difficult decision-making. "I want to tell you about the conversation I had with Alexander Cross yesterday," she began. "Not because you haven't figured out some of it already. I know you're too good at your job not to have investigated, but because what we discussed affects your ability to protect me going forward." Marcus remained silent, recognizing that Princess Alara needed to control the pace and direction of this conversation. His role was to listen and understand, not to interrogate or judge. "Alexander gave me something yesterday," Princess Alara continued, reaching in her desk drawer and removing the envelope Marcus had seen her receive. "Letters that his mother had saved. Correspondence between us over several years when I was younger. Reading them reminded me of who I was before I became so focused on who I was supposed to be." She opened the envelope and removed several sheets of paper, copies of letters written in her younger handwriting. "When I was 16, 17, 18 years old, I wrote to Margaret Cross about my dreams, my fears, my hopes for the future. I told her things I couldn't tell anyone else because she was the only person in my life who seemed to see me as Alara first and as a princess second." Marcus listened as Princess Alara described her relationship with Margaret Cross, confirming much of what Alexander had told him, but providing additional emotional context. Margaret had served not just as a staff member, but as a mentor during some of the most formative years of Princess Alara's life. Her forced departure had left a void that had never been filled by anyone else in the royal household. Reading those letters yesterday reminded me of dreams I had almost forgotten, Princess Alara said, her voice growing softer. "I wanted to study international development. I wanted to work directly with humanitarian organizations, not just serve as their royal patron. I wanted to understand global poverty, climate change, and social justice from the inside, not from the distance that royal protocol requires." Marcus began to understand where this conversation was heading, and he felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "Your Royal Highness, are you considering leaving your royal duties?" Princess Alara met his gaze directly. "I'm considering abdicating my place in the line of succession, Marcus. Not immediately, not without careful planning and consideration for the impact on the monarchy and the kingdom. But yes, I'm seriously considering stepping away from royal life to pursue the work I believe I was truly meant to do." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything Marcus thought he understood about his role and responsibilities. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family. But what did that mean when a member of that family wanted to leave it behind? How did he protect someone who saw protection itself as a barrier to living an authentic life? Your Royal Highness, Marcus said carefully, such a decision would have enormous implications, not just for you personally, but for the monarchy and the kingdom. Have you discussed this with His Majesty or other members of the family? Princess Alara shook her head. Not yet. I wanted to explore my options and understand the full implications before having conversations that can't be undone. But I've been researching the legal and constitutional requirements for abdication, and I've been in contact with some humanitarian organizations about possible roles that would allow me to use my education and experience in meaningful ways. Marcus processed this information, recognizing the careful thought and planning that had gone into Princess Alara's consideration of this dramatic step. She wasn't acting impulsively or emotionally. She was approaching abdication as a serious career and life decision that required the same kind of strategic thinking that any major life change would demand. Alexander Cross has been helping you with this research? Marcus asked. Alexander has been serving as a sounding board and advisor, yes. His perspective is valuable because he understands both the royal world, through his mother's experience, and the outside world where I would need to build a new life. He's helped me think through practical considerations like privacy, security, and how to transition from royal duties to civilian work. Marcus found himself in uncharted territory. Everything in his training had prepared him to protect Princess Alara from external threats, but nothing had prepared him to help her navigate a decision that might fundamentally change her relationship with the institution he was sworn to serve. Your Royal Highness, if you're serious about this path, then there are security implications that need to be considered immediately. Your personal safety would be affected in ways that go beyond traditional royal protection. That's one of the reasons I wanted to speak with you directly, Princess Alara replied. If I were to abdicate, I would still need security protection for some period of time, probably several years. The transition from royal life to civilian life can't happen overnight, and there would be risks associated with that transition that require professional management. Marcus realized that Princess Alara was asking him to consider whether he would be willing to continue protecting her even if she chose to leave royal life behind. It was a question that challenged not just his professional protocols, but his personal understanding of duty and loyalty. There's something else, Princess Alara continued. If I do decide to move forward with abdication, I would want to announce it in a way that minimizes damage to the monarchy and maximizes my ability to pursue meaningful work afterward. That would require careful timing, strategic communication, and probably a gradual transition rather than an immediate departure. How gradual? Marcus asked, trying to understand the practical implications of what she was describing. Possibly 2 years, Princess Alara replied. Time to complete my current charitable commitments, help identify and train my replacement in various roles, and establish the relationships and opportunities one would need in civilian life. But also time to prepare my family and the palace staff for the transition, and to ensure that my departure strengthens rather than weakens the monarchy. Marcus was struck by the thoughtfulness of Princess Alara's approach. Far from being a reckless abandonment of duty, her consideration of abdication appeared to be motivated by a desire to serve the greater good in a different capacity while minimizing harm to the institutions and people she would leave behind. Your Royal Highness, I need to ask you directly, is your relationship with Alexander Cross romantic in nature? Because if it is, that would create additional complications for both your security and your decision-making process. Princess Alara smiled slightly, the first time Marcus had seen her truly relaxed expression during their conversation. No, Marcus. Alexander and I are friends, close friends who understand each other's situations and support each other through difficult decisions. But we're not romantically involved. My consideration of abdication isn't motivated by a desire to marry someone the royal family wouldn't approve of. It's motivated by a desire to do work that I believe will make a meaningful difference in the world. Marcus felt a measure of relief at this clarification, though he recognized that Princess Alera's motivations were actually more complex and potentially more permanent than a romantic relationship might have been. Someone in love might eventually change their mind about leaving royal life, but someone driven by a deep sense of professional calling was likely to remain committed to their chosen path regardless of obstacles or discouragements. If you decide to move forward with this plan, Marcus said, you'll need allies within the palace who can help manage the practical and political aspects of the transition. Have you identified people who might be willing to support you? That's one of the most challenging aspects of this situation, Princess Alera admitted. Most of the people around me are invested in maintaining the status quo, either because they genuinely believe royal service is my highest calling or because their own careers depend on the continuation of current arrangements. I'm essentially contemplating a decision that would disappoint many people I care about and disrupt many lives that have been built around supporting my royal role. Marcus recognized the isolation inherent in Princess Alera's situation. The same protocols and boundaries that protected her from external pressures also prevented her from easily finding advisors who could provide objective guidance about such a fundamental life decision. Alexander Cross had been able to serve that role precisely because he existed outside the royal system. But his outsider status also limited his ability to help navigate the institutional challenges that abdication would present. Your Royal Highness, Marcus said, making a decision that surprised even him. If you decide to proceed with abdication, I would be honored to continue serving as your protection officer during the transition and afterward for as long as you need that protection. Princess Alera's expression showed genuine surprise and gratitude. Marcus, that would mean giving up your career in royal service. Are you certain you would be willing to make that sacrifice? Marcus had been asking himself the same question since the conversation began, and he realized that his answer came from a deeper understanding of duty than he had possessed before. Your Royal Highness, my oath was to protect you, not to protect the institution of the monarchy. If you believe that leaving royal life is the right decision for you, then my job is to help you make that transition safely, regardless of where it leads. The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical considerations like security arrangements, communication strategies, and the legal requirements for abdication. By the time Marcus left Princess Alera's study, he had committed to helping her explore her options while maintaining the discretion necessary to protect both her interests and the monarchy's stability during what would inevitably be a delicate and potentially controversial process. As he walked through the palace corridors back to his office, Marcus reflected on how completely his understanding of his role had changed in the span of a few days. He had entered this situation believing that his job was to protect Princess Alera from external threats and deviations from established protocol. He now understood that his job was something much more complex, helping her navigate the intersection of personal authenticity and public responsibility in a way that honored both her individual needs and her obligations to the institutions and people who depended on her. The real test of his commitment to this new understanding would come in the weeks ahead, as Princess Alera made her final decision about abdication and began implementing whatever plan she chose. Marcus would need to balance his loyalty to her with his responsibilities to the royal household, his commitment to discretion with his obligation to prevent harm, and his respect for tradition with his recognition that sometimes traditions needed to evolve to remain relevant and meaningful. But for the first time since witnessing Princess Alera's secret meeting with Alexander Cross, Marcus felt confident that he understood his role in the unfolding drama. He wasn't just a bodyguard or a protocol enforcer. He was a trusted advisor whose job was to help someone he had come to respect deeply make one of the most important decisions of her life, while ensuring that the process unfolded in a way that minimized harm to everyone involved. The afternoon sun was setting over Valenhall Palace as Marcus settled into his office to begin planning for whatever challenges lay ahead. He had committed to protecting Princess Alera through a transition that might fundamentally change both their lives, and he intended to honor that commitment with the same dedication and professionalism that had defined his entire career in royal service. 3 weeks after Princess Alera's revelation about her consideration of abdication, Marcus found himself managing a situation that tested every aspect of his professional training and personal judgment. The princess had decided to make a preliminary approach to the king about her intentions, and the repercussions were spreading through the royal household like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. The meeting between Princess Alera and King Edward had taken place 2 days ago in the king's private study, with only the monarch's private secretary present as witness. Marcus had not been privy to the conversation itself, but its aftermath had been impossible to ignore. The king had immediately summoned the queen, Prince William, the heir apparent, and the palace's senior advisors for a series of emergency consultations that had continued around the clock since the revelation. Marcus learned the details of these high-level discussions through a combination of official briefings and palace intelligence networks that he had cultivated over years of service. Princess Alera's preliminary expression of interest in abdication had been met with a mixture of shock, disappointment, and strategic concern about its potential impact on the monarchy's stability and public perception. The king's initial response, according to Marcus's sources, had been one of paternal concern rather than royal displeasure. King Edward had expressed understanding for his daughter's desire to pursue meaningful work, but had questioned whether such pursuits were incompatible with continued royal service. He had requested time to explore alternative arrangements that might address Princess Alera's professional aspirations while maintaining her place in the royal family. Prince William's reaction had been more complex. As heir to the throne, he understood better than most the weight of royal responsibility and the personal sacrifices it required. But he had also expressed concern about the precedent that Princess Alera's abdication might set for other family members who struggled with the constraints of royal life. If one royal could choose personal fulfillment over dynastic duty, what prevented others from making similar decisions when faced with difficult circumstances? The Queen's response had been the most strategically focused. Rather than debating the merits of Princess Alera's decision, she had immediately begun considering its constitutional implications and the steps that would be required to manage public and parliamentary reaction. The Queen's experience had taught her that royal family decisions were never purely personal. They inevitably became matters of national interest that required careful management to prevent damage to the monarchy's reputation and effectiveness. Marcus had been briefed on these developments by Sir Richard Pemberton, the palace's head of security, who had made clear that Princess Alera's protection remained a top priority regardless of her future intentions. But Sir Richard had also made it clear that Marcus's own position was under review, given his close involvement with the princess during the period when she had been contemplating abdication. "Captain Thorne," Sir Richard had said during their private meeting, "I need to understand your role in Princess Alera's current thinking. There are some who believe that your failure to report her unauthorized meeting with Alexander Cross contributed to her current course of action." Marcus had chosen his words carefully, recognizing that his response could affect not just his career, but his ability to continue protecting Princess Alera during what was likely to be a challenging transition period. "Sir Richard, my primary concern has always been Princess Alera's safety and well-being. When I observed her meeting with Alexander Cross, I made a judgment that understanding the context of that meeting was more important than immediately filing a protocol violation report. Based on my subsequent investigation, I believe that judgment was correct." "And what did your investigation reveal?" Sir Richard had asked. Marcus had provided a carefully edited account of his conversations with Alexander Cross and Princess Alera, emphasizing the legitimate nature of their relationship and the thoughtful approach the princess was taking to her consideration of major life decisions. He had portrayed his own role as that of a protective officer seeking to understand potential threats to his principal security, rather than as an advisor or enabler of decisions that challenged royal protocol. Sir Richard had listened without comment, then delivered a verdict that reflected the complex political dynamics surrounding Princess Alera's situation. "Captain Thorne, your service record is exemplary, and your commitment to Princess Alera's protection is unquestioned. However, given the sensitivity of the current situation, I'm assigning Lieutenant Shun as co-lead of the princess's protection detail. This will ensure continuity of service while providing additional oversight during what may be a challenging period for all concerned. Marcus had accepted this decision with professional grace, recognizing it as a reasonable compromise that allowed him to continue protecting Princess Alara while addressing concerns about his independence and judgment. Lieutenant Shun was an excellent officer whose skills and discretion made her an ideal partner for managing the complex security challenges that lay ahead. The new arrangement was tested immediately when Princess Alara requested another private meeting with Alexander Cross to discuss the royal family's initial reaction to her preliminary approach about abdication. The meeting was scheduled to take place at Alexander's apartment, requiring Marcus and Lieutenant Shun to coordinate protection in an environment that was both more private and potentially more vulnerable than palace grounds. Marcus had spent considerable time over the past 3 weeks refining his assessment of Alexander Cross, and had reached the conclusion that the young man represented no direct threat to Princess Alara's safety. But the current circumstances added new dimensions to the security challenges associated with their relationship. If Princess Alara's consideration of abdication became public knowledge prematurely, Alexander could become a target for media attention, political pressure, or even physical threats from individuals who opposed her decision. The meeting took place on a rainy Thursday afternoon in London. Marcus and Lieutenant Shun positioned themselves to provide security coverage while maintaining the discretion that Princess Alara had requested. Marcus remained in visual contact with Alexander's building, while Chun monitored radio communications and coordinated with backup units positioned nearby. The meeting lasted longer than expected, nearly 3 hours instead of the planned 90 minutes. Marcus found himself growing increasingly concerned as the time stretched on, not because he feared for Princess Alara's immediate safety, but because prolonged meetings suggested complex discussions that might lead to decisions with far-reaching implications. When Princess Alara finally emerged from the building, Marcus immediately noted changes in her demeanor. The uncertainty and internal conflict that had characterized her recent behavior had been replaced by something that looked like resolution. She moved with the purposeful stride of someone who had reached a difficult decision and was prepared to act on it. The drive back to Valenhall Palace was conducted in relative silence, with Princess Alara gazing out the window while apparently processing whatever had been discussed during her extended meeting with Alexander Cross. Marcus used the time to observe and analyze her body language, trying to gauge whether her apparent resolution represented a decision to proceed with abdication or to remain in royal service. It wasn't until they reached the palace that Princess Alara provided clarity about her state of mind. As they prepared to exit the vehicle, she turned to Marcus with an expression of calm determination. "Marcus, I'll be requesting another meeting with the king tomorrow morning. I think it's time to move forward with definitive plans rather than continuing to explore possibilities." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Your Royal Highness, have you reached a final decision about your future?" Princess Alara nodded. "I have, and I'll need to discuss with you how that decision affects your role and responsibilities. But not here and not now. Can you arrange for us to meet privately tomorrow afternoon, after I've spoken with the king?" Marcus confirmed that he could arrange such a meeting, though he was acutely aware that Princess Alara's final decision, whatever it was, would likely trigger a series of events that would test every aspect of the security and support systems that surrounded the royal family. The next morning brought an atmosphere of heightened tension throughout Valenhall Palace. Word had spread among the senior staff that Princess Alara had requested an urgent meeting with the king, and speculation about the purpose of that meeting created an undercurrent of anxiety that affected everyone from senior advisors to maintenance personnel. Marcus spent the morning reviewing security protocols for various scenarios that might unfold depending on Princess Alara's decision. If she chose to remain in royal service, but with modified duties, the security implications would be manageable within existing frameworks. If she chose to proceed with abdication, the challenges would be far more complex, involving not just her personal protection, but also the management of public reaction, media attention, and potential political consequences. Lieutenant Chun proved to be an invaluable partner during this preparatory period, bringing fresh perspective and analytical skills that complemented Marcus's experience and institutional knowledge. Together, they developed contingency plans for different announcement scenarios, media management strategies, and security arrangements that could be implemented quickly if circumstances required immediate action. The meeting between Princess Alara and the king lasted nearly 2 hours, considerably longer than their previous discussion and long enough to suggest that substantive decisions were being made rather than simply discussed. Marcus monitored the situation from his office, maintaining radio contact with security personnel positioned throughout the palace while tracking the movements of senior advisors and family members who might be called upon to participate in follow-up meetings. When the meeting concluded, Marcus observed a flurry of activity that suggested significant developments. The king's private secretary immediately summoned the queen and Prince William for consultations, while palace communication staff began what appeared to be preliminary planning sessions for potential public statements. The pattern of activity suggested that Princess Alara had not simply expressed continued interest in abdication, but had presented concrete plans that required immediate royal family response. Marcus's speculation was confirmed later that afternoon when Princess Alara requested their scheduled private meeting. She appeared calmer than she had in weeks, but there was also a gravity to her demeanor that suggested the weight of decisions made and commitments undertaken. "Marcus," she began without preamble, "I've informed the king that I intend to abdicate my place in the line of succession within the next 18 months. We've agreed on a process that will allow me to complete my current royal commitments while preparing for the transition to civilian life." Marcus absorbed this news with the professional composure he had developed over years of managing crisis situations, though internally he felt the significance of the moment. Princess Alara had crossed the line from consideration to commitment, and everything that followed would be shaped by that fundamental decision. "Your Royal Highness, what does this mean for your security arrangements and for the people who have been supporting your royal duties?" "The king has agreed to maintain my security protection for 3 years following the official abdication, with a gradual reduction in coverage as I establish my new life and work arrangements," Princess Alara replied. "As for staff and support personnel, we'll be working over the coming months to identify transition opportunities within the royal household or alternative positions that utilize their skills and experience." Marcus realized that Princess Alara was describing a carefully planned transition that prioritized the welfare of everyone who would be affected by her decision. Rather than simply walking away from royal life, she was taking responsibility for ensuring that her departure caused minimal disruption to the people and institutions that had supported her service. "The king has asked me to maintain complete confidentiality about this decision until we're ready to make a public announcement," Princess Alara continued. "That announcement will probably come in about 6 months after we've had time to complete the necessary legal and constitutional preparations. In the meantime, I'll be continuing my royal duties while quietly preparing for my transition to civilian work." Marcus understood the delicate balance that Princess Alara would need to maintain over the coming months, fulfilling her royal responsibilities with appropriate dedication while simultaneously preparing for a completely different future. The challenge would be enormous, requiring her to live essentially 2 lives simultaneously while maintaining the discretion necessary to prevent premature public disclosure of her plans. "Your Royal Highness, if I may ask, what kind of civilian work are you planning to pursue?" Princess Alara's expression brightened with genuine enthusiasm, the first time Marcus had seen her look truly excited about her future in months. "I'll be joining the International Development Research Institute as a senior program officer, focusing on sustainable economic development in post-conflict regions. It's work that will allow me to use my education in international relations and development studies while contributing to efforts that can make a real difference in people's lives." Marcus was impressed by the specificity and professional focus of Princess Alara's plans. This wasn't a vague escape from royal responsibility, but a carefully considered career transition that would utilize her skills and education and service of humanitarian goals that aligned with her long-standing charitable interests. The position will require significant travel to challenging locations, Princess Alara continued, which is one of the reasons why continued security protection will be necessary, at least initially. I hope you'll consider continuing as my protection officer during the transition and afterward. Marcus had been expecting this question since their conversation 3 weeks ago, and his answer remained the same. Your Royal Highness, I'm honored by your confidence in me, and I'm committed to ensuring your safety and security regardless of where your path leads. The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical details about the transition timeline, security arrangements, and the careful coordination that would be required to manage such a significant change while maintaining the stability and reputation of the monarchy. By the time they concluded their meeting, Marcus had a clear understanding of his role in supporting Princess Alara through what would undoubtedly be one of the most challenging periods of both their lives. As Marcus left Princess Alara's study and walked through the familiar corridors of Valenhall Palace, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him to this point. What had begun as a routine security assignment had evolved into something far more complex and meaningful, a chance to help someone he had come to respect deeply make the transition from institutional duty to personal authenticity while honoring the responsibilities and relationships that had shaped her entire life. The months ahead would test every aspect of his professional skills and personal judgment, but Marcus felt prepared for the challenge. He had committed to protecting Princess Alara not just from physical threats, but from the isolation and overwhelming pressure that could easily accompany such a major life decision. It was a role that went beyond traditional security work and ventured into territory that required wisdom, discretion, and an understanding of human nature that no training manual could provide. But it was also a role that felt more meaningful and important than anything Marcus had done in his 15 years of royal service. He was helping someone choose authenticity over convention, purpose over protocol, and personal fulfillment over institutional expectations, while ensuring that the process unfolded in a way that honored everyone involved and preserved the institutions that would continue after Princess Alara's departure. The sun was setting over Valenhall Palace as Marcus settled into his office to begin detailed planning for the challenging months ahead. He had 18 months to help Princess Alara navigate one of the most complex transitions in modern royal history, and he intended to ensure that when the process was complete, she would be safely established in her new life while the monarchy remained strong and stable for future generations. The final 6 months of Princess Alara's transition from royal life to civilian career unfolded with a complexity that tested every aspect of the carefully laid plans developed over the previous year. What Marcus had anticipated as a gradual, controlled process became instead a delicate balancing act between public service, private preparation, and the unexpected challenges that arose when fundamental life changes intersect with institutional traditions and public expectations. The first major test came in March, when investigative journalists began asking pointed questions about Princess Alara's future plans and her recent meetings with representatives from international development organizations. The palace's communication team, led by the experienced Director of Communications Sir James Morrison, had prepared for this eventuality, but the reality of managing media speculation while maintaining necessary confidentiality proved more challenging than anyone had anticipated. Marcus found himself working more closely than ever with the palace's communication and security teams as they developed strategies to deflect premature disclosure of Princess Alara's plans while continuing to support her official duties. The challenge was complicated by Princess Alara's own desire to remain authentic in her public interactions. She struggled with the deception required to maintain confidentiality about decisions that were reshaping every aspect of her daily life. I feel like I'm lying to everyone, Princess Alara confided to Marcus during one of their weekly security briefings. When I speak at charity events about long-term commitments to the causes I support, I know that in 6 months I'll be stepping away from those roles. While I participate in family functions and royal celebrations, I know that this will be among my last appearances in those contexts. The dishonesty is exhausting. Marcus had come to understand that his role during this transition period involved far more than traditional security concerns. Princess Alara needed someone who could provide emotional support and practical guidance as she navigated the psychological challenges of living simultaneously in two different worlds, her current royal identity and her future civilian career. "Your Royal Highness," Marcus replied, "you're not being dishonest about your commitment to the causes you support. You're simply changing the way you'll support them. And your participation in family functions isn't deceptive. It's honoring relationships and traditions that will remain important to you regardless of your official status." These conversations have become a regular part of Marcus's responsibilities, supplementing his traditional security duties with a role that was part counselor, part strategic advisor, and part confidant. It was a role for which his military and security training had provided no preparation, but which had grown into through necessity and genuine concern for Princess Alara's well-being. The psychological pressure on Princess Alara intensified in April when the king requested that she undertake a major overseas tour representing British commercial and diplomatic interests in Southeast Asia. The tour had been planned before Princess Alara's decision to abdicate, but its timing created a poignant irony. She would be conducting one of her most significant royal assignments while privately preparing to leave royal service forever. Marcus accompanied Princess Alara on the 2-week tour, which included official visits to Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore. The trip provided a compelling illustration of Princess Alara's effectiveness as a royal representative and the genuine respect she commanded from international leaders and organizations. It also made clear the significant loss that the monarchy would experience when she stepped away from such work. But the tour also reinforced Princess Alara's conviction that she had made the right decision about her future. During a private moment in Bangkok, after a particularly successful meeting with Thai development officials, she shared her reflections with Marcus. "I spent today discussing sustainable agriculture programs with people who are actually implementing them in rural communities," she said. "The conversation was more substantive and meaningful than any royal engagement I've participated in over the past 5 years. I could contribute expertise and insights rather than just ceremonial presence. This is what I want my work to be like." Marcus observed throughout the tour that Princess Alara was most energized and engaged when participating in technical discussions about development programs, policy implementation, and strategic planning for humanitarian initiatives. Her formal education and international development, combined with years of exposure to various charitable and diplomatic efforts, had prepared her well for the civilian career she was preparing to pursue. The tour also provided an unexpected benefit for Marcus's own professional development. Working with Princess Alara in challenging international environments, managing security concerns while supporting her substantive engagement with complex issues gave him experience that would prove invaluable when she transitioned to civilian development work that would require similar international travel and cross-cultural navigation. May brought the most difficult phase of the entire transition process, the beginning of formal abdication procedures and the preparation of public announcement materials. Princess Alara worked closely with constitutional lawyers, palace advisors, and communication specialists to ensure that her abdication would be presented in a way that emphasized her continued commitment to public service while minimizing potential damage to the monarchy's reputation and effectiveness. The legal aspects of abdication proved more complex than anyone had initially anticipated. While the United Kingdom had established precedents for royal abdication, Princess Alara's situation was unique in several important ways. She was not the heir to the throne, which simplified some constitutional issues but created others. Her stated intention to continue serving the public in a different capacity, rather than retiring from public life entirely, required careful legal language to ensure that her future civilian work wouldn't create conflicts with her former royal status. Marcus participated in many of these planning sessions, providing input on security arrangements for the announcement and the transition period that would follow. But he also observed the emotional toll that this formal process took on Princess Alara. Moving from private decision-making to official procedures made her choice irreversible in ways that were both liberating and deeply challenging. "I've been a princess for my entire conscious life," she told Marcus after a particularly intense session with constitutional advisors. "Even when I'm certain that abdication is the right decision, letting go of that identity feels like losing a fundamental part of myself. I know who I'm becoming, but I'm still grieving who I'm ceasing to be." Marcus recognized that Princess Alara was experiencing a form of anticipatory grief that was both necessary and healthy, but which required support and understanding from the people around her. He made it a point to acknowledge the significance of her sacrifice while reinforcing the value and importance of the path she was choosing. The public announcement of Princess Alara's abdication was scheduled for the first week of July, time to allow several weeks for public and media reaction before the traditional summer break that would provide some respite from immediate scrutiny. The announcement strategy, developed through intensive collaboration between palace communication staff and external public relations experts, emphasized Princess Alara's commitment to continued public service and the careful planning that had gone into her decision. Marcus spent the weeks leading up to the announcement coordinating enhanced security arrangements that would be necessary to manage expected media attention and public reaction. This involved not just protecting Princess Alara herself, but also ensuring the security of family members who might become targets for media inquiry, palace staff who might be approached for information, and even Alexander Cross, whose relationship with Princess Alara would inevitably become a subject of public speculation. The announcement itself was made through a combination of official palace statement and personal letter from Princess Alara to the people of the kingdom. The letter, which had been drafted and revised over several weeks, struck a tone that was both respectful of royal tradition and authentic to Princess Alara's personal voice and motivations. "It has been the greatest privilege of my life to serve as a member of the royal family and to represent our kingdom's values and interests around the world," the letter read. However, after careful consideration and consultation with His Majesty and other family members, I have decided that I can best continue serving the public good by pursuing a career in international development work that will allow me to contribute more directly to addressing global challenges of poverty, inequality, and sustainable development. The public reaction to the announcement was more positive than anyone had dared to hope. While some criticism focused on Princess Alara's abandonment of duty and tradition, the majority of commentary praised her authenticity, her commitment to public service, and her courage in choosing a path that aligned with her values and expertise. Editorial coverage in major newspapers was generally supportive, with many commentators noting that Princess Alara's decision demonstrated the monarchy's ability to evolve and adapt to changing circumstances. Marcus monitored public reaction carefully, both through official intelligence channels and through his own networks of contacts in security, media, and public opinion research. The overall assessment was that Princess Alara's abdication would not significantly damage the monarchy's reputation and might actually enhance it by demonstrating the institution's flexibility and the genuine commitment of family members to public service in various forms. But managing public reaction was only one aspect of Marcus's responsibilities during this period. He also needed to coordinate Princess Alara's security during her final royal engagements, support her preparation for civilian work, and plan for the continuation of security protection after her official abdication. The International Development Research Institute, where Princess Alara would be working, had been briefed on her security requirements and had agreed to accommodate reasonable protection measures. This would involve some adjustments to normal office procedures and travel arrangements, but nothing that would prevent Princess Alara from performing her new role effectively. Marcus had also been working with Lieutenant Shun and other members of Princess Alara's security team to develop a transition plan for his own career. While Princess Alara had asked him to continue as her protection officer in civilian life, this would require Marcus to leave royal service and establish himself as an independent security consultant. It was a significant professional risk, but one that Marcus felt prepared to take given his commitment to Princess Alera's continued safety and success. August brought Princess Alera's final official royal engagements, a series of farewell visits to charitable organizations she had supported, formal ceremonies transferring her patronages to other family members, and private meetings with royal household staff who had supported her work over the years. These events were emotionally charged for everyone involved, marking the end of relationships and working partnerships that had developed over many years. Marcus found himself deeply moved by the genuine affection and respect that Princess Alera received from people at every level of the royal household and the charitable sector. Kitchen staff, gardeners, charity volunteers, and international diplomats all expressed similar sentiments. That Princess Alera had brought unusual warmth, intelligence, and authenticity to her royal role, and that her departure represented a significant loss for the institution she was leaving behind. But these farewell events also reinforced Marcus's conviction that Princess Alera had made the right decision about her future. In her conversations with charity workers and development professionals, she demonstrated deep knowledge, genuine passion, and strategic thinking that would serve her well in her civilian career. The move from royal patronage to hands-on development work would allow her to utilize skills and interests that had been constrained by the ceremonial aspects of royal service. September marked the beginning of Princess Alera's transition to civilian life, though her official abdication wouldn't be finalized until October. She began working part-time with the International Development Research Institute while completing her final royal duties, effectively living two careers simultaneously for several weeks. Marcus coordinated security for this complex period, ensuring protection for both Princess Alera's royal engagements and her civilian work activities. This required careful coordination with multiple security agencies, detailed planning for different types of events and locations, and constant adaptation to changing schedules and requirements. The most challenging aspect of this transition period was managing the continued media attention that accompanied Princess Alera's every public appearance. While the initial announcement of her abdication had been generally well received, ongoing coverage focused on every detail of her transition and speculation about her future plans. Marcus worked closely with palace communication staff and Princess Alera's new employer to develop media management strategies that protected her privacy while acknowledging legitimate public interest in her transition. October arrived with both ceremony and relief. Princess Alera's formal abdication was completed through a series of legal procedures that transferred her titles and responsibilities to other family members while establishing her new status as a private citizen. The process was conducted with dignity and appropriate ritual, acknowledging both the significance of her decision and the monarchy's respect for her choice. Marcus participated in the final security briefing as Princess Alera's royal protection officer, formally transferring responsibility for her security to the independent arrangement they had established for her civilian career. It was a moment that marked the end of one phase of both their professional lives and the beginning of another that promised new challenges and opportunities. The ceremony was followed by a private family dinner that included only immediate royal family members and a few close staff members who had been essential to Princess Alera's royal service. Marcus was honored to be included in this gathering, which provided an opportunity for informal farewells and expressions of gratitude for years of shared work and mutual support. As the evening concluded and Princess Alera prepared to begin her new life as a civilian development professional, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them both to this point. What had begun 18 months ago with his observation of a secret meeting between Princess Alera and Alexander Cross had evolved into one of the most complex and meaningful assignments of his career. He had helped Princess Alera navigate not just the practical challenges of leaving royal life, but also the emotional and psychological aspects of such a fundamental identity change. He had learned that protecting someone sometimes meant supporting their right to make choices that challenge tradition and expectations, and that true security involved far more than preventing physical threats. Looking ahead, Marcus felt confident about both Princess Alera's future success and his own ability to continue protecting her in her new career. She had demonstrated throughout the transition process that she possessed the intelligence, determination, and authenticity necessary to make significant contributions to international development work. Her royal training had provided her with valuable skills in communication, cultural sensitivity, and strategic thinking that would serve her well in addressing global challenges. For Marcus himself, the transition represented an opportunity to expand his professional capabilities beyond traditional royal protection work. Supporting Princess Alera in international development activities would require skills in cross-cultural security, risk assessment in challenging environments, and coordination with multiple international organizations and security agencies. But perhaps most importantly, the experience had taught Marcus that the most meaningful protection work involved understanding and supporting the people he was responsible for as complete human beings rather than simply as principles to be kept safe. Princess Alera's courage in choosing authenticity over convention had inspired Marcus to expand his own understanding of duty, service, and the ways that professional expertise could contribute to human flourishing and positive change in the world. As Princess Alera began her new life working to address global poverty and sustainable development challenges, and as Marcus transitioned to supporting her in that work, both carried with them the lessons learned during one of the most complex royal transitions in modern history. They had successfully navigated the intersection of personal authenticity and institutional responsibility, demonstrating that it was possible to honor tradition while embracing change, and to serve the public good through multiple pathways that reflected individual talents, interests, and convictions. The story that had begun with a royal guard's concern about an unauthorized meeting had evolved into something far richer and more meaningful, a testament to the possibility of growth, change, and mutual support in the face of complex challenges and difficult decisions. It was a story that would continue as Princess Alera pursued her new career and as Marcus adapted his protective skills to support work that promised to make a genuine difference in addressing some of the world's most pressing challenges.